We are now going to have a panel discussion on the biotech ecosystems and kind of contrast and compare between U.S. and Japan. So let me ask the participants in that panel to come up. I'll ask the moderator, Chris Gadbaugh, to actually do the introductions for the members. But Chris, if you can come up, and Carolina Rizzo, Mark Ohori, Shin, sorry, Shin Fusei, sorry, excuse me, and Tadao Inawa. Did I get everyone? And then we also are being joined by Fred Shane on video, or not? Is that going to happen? He's coming, okay. So great. So let me turn it over to Chris Gadbaugh. Chris, thanks.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. I'll be coming up to join you in a moment, and I will let you introduce yourselves. You're far too distinguished to let me do that. But so everyone knows, we're here this afternoon first to talk about a comparison between the U.S. and Japanese biotech ecosystems. We'll focus on talking about the academic landscape. We'll dive deeper into the differences between the U.S. and Japanese fundraising landscape. And we'll also talk a little bit more about teams and founder profiles. All right, let's get started. Please.
First of all, thank you very much for having me to this wonderful panel session with the great panelists other than me. Thank you very much. Yeah, and I'm happy to be here. And so my name is Mark Ohori, partner and chief investment officer at University of Tokyo Innovation Platform Company, which is a venture capital firm in Tokyo. And yes, or you said that about the ecosystem, innovation ecosystem, right?
To kick things off, I'll ask each of our speakers to give a brief introduction on themselves and to speak for 1 or 2 minutes about their experience in the biotech ecosystem, ideally touching on both the US and Japan if possible, but really with a focus on their own expertise. Mark, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm doing a venture capitalist at here at Tokyo. And I used to be belonging to Astellas Venture Management in Bay Area. And I was investing in various US and European companies, 2/3 of which already exited, which is good. And I moved to, from 2016, I moved to Boston to support the company's Astellas' the innovation acquisition over there with my team. And I made strategic partnerships with not only with industry peers, but also with academic partners like Harvard or MIT. And I moved to here so from 2020 and to help the startup communities to grow. And is that okay? You mentioned about the ecosystems or something like that?
Hi, my name is Carolina Garcia Rizzo. Thank you so much to the organization for having me here. It has been really a pleasure so far. Japan is an amazing country and Tokyo, really amazing city. Sunday was, thank you so much for making it so nice for us, for the weather. So I have to say thank you. I have been, well, my background is, my PhD was in atomic physics, done partly in UC Berkeley with a Fulbright fellowship. And then I moved into business thanks to another fellowship. I did my MBA in MIT. And I have been having several roles of business development with several corporations, one of them Roche, another Cepheid, part of Danaher now. And then I took 2 CBO roles, Chief Business Officer, in 2 startups. One was Just Biotherapeutics, which was the ex-Amgen group from Seattle. It was backed up by Arch Ventures, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Merck, and Lilly Asia Ventures. And I took them, I helped them to grow. I fundraising for them as well as I sold them with a very successful exit. The second was immunoengineering, which was in a small molecule biotech with a pipeline in neuro, oncology, and immuno-oncology. And I helped them to go IPO. And after 2 times CBO, I decided to start being in boards and giving back to entrepreneurs. And that's what I'm currently doing. I'm in 4 boards and I'm doing consulting for those companies as a business person. And I'm really excited of all the startups that are here today. I'm very excited, of course, of the entrepreneurs that has been already very successful to be back and help the ecosystem to be promoted. So thank you.
So my name is Shin, or Shinichiro Fusei. People call me Shin. Thanks for having me today. It's awesome to be here. So I'm a partner and managing director at TPG's Life Science Venture Fund, which we call Life Sciences Innovations, or LSI. So it's a $550 million fund, and to focus on life science venture investing. A little bit about TPG and then myself. So TPG is a global asset manager. You may know the name. It's actually a public company with a little bit over 220 billion under management. You know, general investing in private equity, private credit, different strategies, different funds. So we are the life science venture arm. And as for myself, so as you can tell from my name, I'm from Japan, but I'm based in Cambridge. I've been there for, I don't know, I've been in New England for 20 years now. But so I did most of my education here in Japan. I grew up here as well as the U.S. And then I moved back to the U.S. for my PhD in immunology at Dartmouth on the East Coast. From there, I moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and started consulting. And then pretty soon moved to an operating company called Bluebird Bio, a cell and gene therapy company, which is about 4 approved products at this point. And my main role is in business development. From there, one thing led to another, and I kind of stumbled into the venture capital business. So I joined MPM Capital in 2016. Actually, that's where I met Mark, because he was working in our office. The Stellus Cambridge office was in MPM's office. So MPM Capital is one of the larger life science venture firms in the US, and it's focused on the early stage. So my role is twofold. One, as an investment partner, but second, we created our own company. So I was an operator as well. So I was involved in starting a cell and gene therapy company called Elevate Bio. So I was the first CBO of the company for several years. We started a circular RNA company out of Dan Anderson's lab out of MIT. So I was the first CEO of the company before we recruited a real CEO to replace me. And then started a third bispecific company as well. And then in 2021, TPG asked me to move to TPG and start this new fund. And so we are actively investing. So that's me.
Hello, my name is Taro Inaba. Thank you again, for inviting me to this really exciting opportunity. So let me tell you a little bit about myself and Lemijus Ventures, where I'm working. So I spent 10 years at a large company called Mitsuru in Japan, where I was responsible for biotech investments. And after accumulating, portfolio companies and performing, relatively nicely, I had a chance to create this independent fund back in 2013. And, it took 1 year to create fund, So eventually we did the first closing for the first fund in 2014. Since then, we have been raising 2 capitals so far, 2 funds, sorry. And we are right now managing $175 million. And we do 2 things, we are a cross-border venture fund. We have offices in Tokyo, Seattle, and Boston. And we do 2 things. One is we try to lead, Series A syndicates for, seizable round of Series A financing. These days, US Series A rounds are too big for us to lead. So we focus on smaller rounds, and we follow very classic, Series A, B, C type of financing. And we have been building portfolio under that strategy. The other strategy we pursue is creating companies by ourselves. And since our inception of the first fund, we created 8 companies from the scratch, and moving the development forward in both in US and Japan. And we do company creation from mainly from university assets, but we do company creation based on some assets from US universities as well. And in this process, we learned a lot. And right now we operate a new incubator comprised of 16 members, where we really don't have to rely on entrepreneurs for creating companies, because Japan has everything except experienced entrepreneurs. We have good science here. We have good talents from pharma industry, which is a solid industry, and we have a lot of governmental support here. But unfortunately, we have very limited number of entrepreneurs. So our model is, we play as an entrepreneurial role for company creation. We do data reproducibility checking. We do translation. We do early stage data generation. We raise capital, and we create new companies. That is our current model. So hopefully we can discuss, positively about Japan ecosystem today. Thank you very much.
And Fred, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Fred Shane, the managing
One
partner
moment,
at
Fred,
Axel
we
Capital.
unfortunately can't hear you.
Hello? 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 Hello, hello, hello.
Okay, try again.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Fred, can you hear us?
Yeah, yeah. My microphone is active,
Oh,
so I think it's I think it's hello, hello, hello. Hello? Test, test, test. Can you hear me? Hello?
all right, Fred, we can hear you a little bit, but we're going to keep the panel going at the moment.
Yeah, please,
And
please.
come back to you as we get this
Okay.
technical issue figured out. So
Sure.
you'll be getting some messages, I think, on the back end. Thank you.
Yep.
So as thank you to each of our panelists. Thank you, everyone, while we work through that. And to kick things off, let's start at the beginning. As we've heard multiple times today, and as you all know well, the research industry in Japan is incredibly strong. And so often in the US, and it seems like in Japan, there's a strong push to spin companies out of the university ecosystem. And so, Mark, would love to start off by asking you, can you share more about the academic ecosystem in Japan and how it supports biotech companies spinning out of universities?
Yeah. That's a important aspect to consider the Japan biotech ecosystems about the academic translation. That we do have 3 strategic support for that purpose, academic translation. Firstly, obviously we have $400 million under management to support the startups to grow. And secondly, we do a operation of the pitch contest. The name is first round. Well, I believe that which must be one of the most famous pitch contests in Japan to provide the non-string money to and the skill sets to grow the startup companies at the beginning of their inception. And lastly, so we provide the HR platform system. We call it the Deep Tech Dive, which can be registered by the people and the community with their own information and to help the startups companies to find out a good talent for their companies. And yeah, as I mentioned, we require the multiple items to start a company other than, other than the academic sciences, actually. So we prepared to such kind of strategic systems to put all things together in one place to make something happen, which must be important aspect for us to grow the such kind of startup and the innovations from the academic sciences. Yeah, that's our strategy.
That all makes a lot of sense. And Shin, do you mind, you mentioned that working at MPM, you do quite a lot you did quite a lot to help spin out companies. Mind commenting
Yeah,
as well?
yeah. So I've actually, so I've done several of those out of U.S.
Hello, hello.
universities, as well as
you hear me?
actually one out of University of Tokyo called Vedanta. So I was involved in the early stages of that. So, I've been involved in this discussion for a long time. I actually used to write for Nikkei Biotech for like 10 years. And part of that was kind of writing about this. And, I'll be a little blunt and might be maybe a little controversial, but I think the issue is translational. To your point and to Mark's point, and Izumo-san and Mori-san made the same point as well. I do think Japanese basic research is pretty strong. There's pretty interesting technologies coming out of Japan, but so
Can
do
you hear
other
me?
ecosystems.
Can you
right?
hear me?
And if you look at different cities, different quote unquote ecosystems around the world, like Germany has great academic institutions, UK has great, academic institutions, France does, right? China. But why is it that Boston and San Francisco by far outpace the others, right? And that's a question that everybody asks, not just Tokyo, but North Carolina asks the same question, Seattle asks the same question, right? And it's really the translational talent that's lacking. So, somebody mentioned this earlier, but I think Inaba-san did, but the entrepreneur pool,
Hello,
if we can
hello.
somehow increase that, I think that's one of the key solutions, to the problem.
And that's a perfect transition because Inaba-san, having spun out and working to build companies here in Japan and address that translational gap, as Shin mentioned, we would love to hear your thoughts on what we can do to support the early stage ecosystem and simultaneously how we can help in the translation and the building of these companies here in Japan, increase the number of experienced entrepreneurs as they then take those companies forward.
Yeah, thank you. So there are many things I have to cover to answer that question, but there are 2 or 3 issues with university technologies, maybe partly covered by my colleagues here. But, the first biggest challenge is data reproducibility. This is global thing, not only Japanese thing, university data are sometimes not reproducible. So investors are very concerned about that point, and until we really make sure that data are truly reproducible, we cannot, actively investing. So we really need to spend a little bit of money, to make sure that data are reproducible. The second challenge we see typically with Japanese universities is quality of IP. Japanese universities don't have enough budget, and money goes equally to many different kind of inventions. But especially for therapeutics area, we really have to have a very strong IP. Without clear exclusivity, no investors are willing to invest. No pharma partner wants to make a deal, right? So to build industrially, compelling IP, ideally we have to start working with professors or scientists before they are publishing papers. But it's really difficult to establish such kind of relationship before scientists is publishing paper. There's a chicken and egg cycle here, right? Unless you see paper, you are not convinced. But when you see paper and you are convinced, it's too late for you to start thinking about improving quality of IP. So that is the second challenge. We spend a lot of time on this matter. And the third, third challenge is a perception gap between investors and scientists or professors. Sometimes scientists and professors are very much interested in creating companies, but sometimes we see a misalignment of goals. Sometimes scientists really want to keep generating data in the ways that technology can be applicable for large variety of things. And the investor wants to see one single product, being developed, as quick as possible to cure some disease. So it's sometimes difficult to overcome this gap. But this gap is getting narrower and narrower in Japan right now, because of the increased level of awareness among professors or scientists. They come to learn what is the meaning to do commercialization of or translating their science into commercial products. So over the last 10 years, I see a great advancement in narrowing the perception gap, which is very positive thing for Japanese biotech ecosystem. But I'm not sure if I'm answering to your question. To answer fully your question, we have to discuss more. But to help them, we can do many things. We really increase the awareness of the process of company. What is a real goal for investors and the pharma industry? And we also have to educate people about the concrete process, how companies could be created, so that everybody get share the goal, and everybody can more easily work together.
Sorry, Naba-san, thank you. And at this point, Mark, would you be open to sharing your thoughts on some of the challenges in the academic ecosystem that Naba-san talks about, and how the University of Tokyo, you're starting to address them?
Yeah, as Taro said, the patent filing should be one of the first challenge for the PIs and the future entrepreneurs to be facing. And it's not easy to expect or to predict the patent would become the great one at the beginning of their invention. And so we need to file them all to the government's filing systems, ideally, but there's a restriction from the financial aspects, and it must be the important aspect. But I have to mention about the U.S. provisional patent filing, which is different from Japan's systems, which is a really costless system to file their patents using the original papers or the simple data. Just only, I don't think it doesn't cost too much, and very easy for file the patent at the beginning of the invention. And in Japan, there's no such kind of systems, patent filing systems I had, and it should be one of the things we can consider to facilitate such kind of the early stage, the patent filing to be improved.
Thank you, Mark. And we're going to attempt to dial Fred in. So at this point, Fred should be on channel 2 in our translation devices. Fred, do you want to give that a try?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Ah, yes.
Oh,
Can hear you
great.
indeed.
All right. I'm going to introduce myself just briefly and then continue with the panel, or?
I would say let everyone get their headsets on, give it maybe 10, 15 seconds. But otherwise, yes, glad we have you joining us. Thank you, Fred, for your patience. And thank you, everyone here.
No problem.
Channel
I'll be
1
quick.
for Japanese, channel 2 for Fred.
Go. Yeah. Hello.
All right, it looks like almost everyone is ready. Fred, do you want to share a
Yep.
brief introduction of yourself?
Sure. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for bearing with the technical difficulties here. My name is Fred Shane. I'm the founder and managing partner of Axe Capital, headquartered in Tokyo. We used to actually be right across the street from where you guys are right now, but now in the Toronto area. My quick background, I'm half Japanese, half American, grew up in Kobe, went to high school and college in the States, pretty much stayed in the States, and my career has been focused pretty much in finance. Started my career at Enron, pricing commodity derivatives. I moved over to Mori-san, USA, where I spearheaded their biotech VC operation. Then moved over to a distressed private equity in New York called Patriarch, and then finally ended up in Tokyo about 12 years ago now. I think 13 years ago in 2010, end of 2010, really 2011, and took on a job as an investment banker at Mitsuru Securities. 6 years ago, I spun out Axel Capital with the support of Mizuho, Bristol Myers Squibb, some other Japanese financial investors, as well as strategics, and big support from SMRJ, the Japanese government. So we have a very wide range of different types of investors, both strategic, financial, as well as sovereign wealth. We focus mainly on, well, I should say broadly on the full spectrum of life sciences industry. So we invest in drug discovery, development, diagnostics, medical technologies, software and hardware devices, anything to do with medicine. Stage-wise, yeah, we do from founding companies, very early stage, all the way down to pre-IPO, and we're geographically diversified too. So not just Japan, we invest in the States, Europe, as well as Israel, Singapore, Taiwan, pretty much anywhere we find compelling technology with a clear path to exit. So that's in a nutshell who we are. I think I'll keep it short and let you guys continue with the panel.
Thank you,
Nice to
Fred.
meet you all. Yep.
Thank you, Fred. And we will be sure to come back to you shortly. But to keep the conversation moving, I wanted to build on the conversation we've had so far, and where we've focused a lot on founders. And Carolina, having worked so extensively with companies, especially also those who are later stage, sitting on boards, working closely with founders, would love to hear your thoughts on commonalities among founder profiles that make an entrepreneur or help them in achieve success.
Thank you for the question. I think that we have seen it already with the two wonderful speakers, entrepreneurs that we have seen here, that we have listened today. I think that there is a lack of being afraid of failure. And I think that is something that in the States is really amazing if you compare to other countries. I'm from Europe, we are in Japan now. There is a certain sense in these countries where if you fail, it's not good. And in the States, actually, if you fail, it's good. Some investors, they even ask you, tell me about your failures. What have you learned? Because that's the key thing, right? Fail and learn from the failure. And that's something that I have seen in all the entrepreneurs I have worked with. They are fearless, they have no fear, and they want to make it happen. They know it's difficult, but they put all their energy into it. We have here the entrepreneur that is still with us, that he said, right? I mean, I knew that it was gonna be difficult. I didn't know how I was gonna make it, but we try very hard to do it. The other is resilience, of course, like I can make it. I know it's gonna be hard, and I will make it no matter what. I will work hard for it. The can-do attitude. I can do it. I know I'm gonna find lots of obstacles, but I'm gonna do it. And and resourceful, right? Being able to find resources no matter where. It's almost like finding water in a desert, no? And I think that all of the entrepreneurs as well that I have worked with, even if they were scientific at the beginning, because they were maybe professors at university of PhD students or postdocs, they had a certain business sense, which is very important. I think that to make it in the entrepreneurship world, you have to have that dual science and commercial brain that is difficult to find. But I think that you have to do it. Otherwise, your technology will be great, but you have to make money out of the technology. And this is what our colleagues here were commenting, right? It's the difficulty of translating science into business that is gonna really make it or break it in a startup.
Thank you, Carolina. And Fred, as someone who's investing in both geographies and who has such a broad experience, could you maybe comment on some of the founders you've seen and how they embody the traits that Carolina just described?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'm gonna, I need to agree with most of my fellow panelists. I forget who said what, but definitely I think there are scientific talents in this country. But the lack of, I think, the structural support, as well as people knowing the VC playbook, and someone mentioned, being IP savvy. I mean, all those things, I think although they're improving and getting better, still the resources aren't all in place for the early stage, VC ecosystem to flourish. I think it'll get there. I think it's moving in the right direction. But I think, more aspiring entrepreneurs, I think they need to understand and see the good examples from the States. As you know, it didn't happen over a few years in the States, even, right? I mean, the biotech industry really developed over the course of a few decades. So I think there's a good example to be followed. And I see that, as Carolina, I think you just said, how there's like people with tenacity and fire in the belly and the heart of achieving no matter what. I'm starting to see more and more people like that, and the culture also changing in terms of talent mobility. So I think we're headed in the right direction, but I do think Japan is one of the few countries that can actually afford more and get there faster. So I hope I gave you my 2 cents there.
No, that's a great summary, Fred, and it addresses a lot of the points that we've all talked about here today. The foundations are strong and everything's moving in the right direction. However, as we think about moving that forward, maybe one final question just with regards to time, I'd love to ask each of you to comment. What if there were 1 or 2 things that could be done, and hopefully these can be additive, where would you recommend Japan's ecosystem focus to continue to build and move forward? And maybe we can start down the line, Mark.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's important for us Japanese to understand the most important things we require is the to understand the matter of, this is not a matter of rationality, but it's a kind of a matter of credit and the track record, something like that. And there are a lot of people who had a rationality in Japan, but there are less people in Japan to make a successful record in the United States or European countries. And some people doesn't know the practice in the United States, which is a little bit different from the Japanese one. And both are rational, and both can be closed in each part. But if we apply the Japanese customs or the practices to the U.S. Businesses, everyone feel the weirdness on that. We need to find out, we have to understand such kind of stuff. We need the experiences in the United States, and we need the talents who had the experience in the United States or European countries to apply our rationalities or sciences to the global community. That is the most important aspects for us to focus on, I believe.
Yeah, I'm not Japanese and I don't live in Japan, but from what I hear and from what the previous speakers mentioning, I think Mr. Fujiyoshi mentioned translational from research into commercialization, and it was also mentioned by my colleagues, and I think that's really key. Sometimes I've seen it in MIT, in Harvard, and UCSF, just putting together MBA students and scientists is a good solution for that. They let them work together, create the ecosystem. And the other is the ecosystem. I mean, if you create the ecosystem, if the successful entrepreneurs start giving back, they are the role models. So more and more will want to follow them. So ecosystem is key. And I think that Japan has everything. I mean, the science is amazing. I was a scientist. I was reading articles published here. The science is amazing. The people are really hard work. They are really committed. But maybe it's creating more ecosystem, breaking silos, and getting everybody helping each other at what they are best. The business minds at business, the science as science, and trying to learn from each other.
So I think one thing Japan needs is a success case. So Japan needs a Genentech. Japan needs a Genzyme. Japan needs an Immunex, right? So if you look at every ecosystem that's somewhat successful, like Boston, San Francisco, San Diego, as Fred mentioned earlier, takes time. You know, the Cambridge ecosystem started when BioJent moved their R&D from Switzerland to Cambridge. And gradually over, I don't know, 4 or 5 decades, I guess, with ups and downs along the way, it has evolved into what it is now. And what has made it sustainable and actually a magnet for talent is that we have success cases like BioJent, Genzyme, and Millennium, right? 2 of those got bought out, but those were success not only financially, but also, and I'm mainly focused on therapeutic companies here, but they were successful in creating breakthrough products that really changed standard care, right? And were also financially successful. San Francisco, clear case of Genentech, right? And why you need that is because, one, that's where the talent comes from. Like a lot of the entrepreneurs, if you look at Boston, there's the Millennium Mafia, there's the Genzymers that come out of Genzyme and former BioJents, and of course the large pharmas as well. But that's where the entrepreneurs come from. So I do think, I don't know how you do that tactically, but I think what Japan should focus on is creating a success case, kind of like a Genentech.
Yeah, I was trying to say what Fuse-san said, so my point was taken. So let me let me give you different, two things instead of one. Is that okay? So the first thing I would like to propose is creating a slightly different model here. We should not import the US model. That is too challenging for many Japanese people. Primarily because culture is different, and also accumulation of wealth is different here. If one of us is requested to create company, with your own capital, with our capital, if you are asked to invest $500,000 to create company, how many Japanese people can do it? Because normal Japanese farmer people, for example, personally don't have such level of capital at the individual basis, and it's too much for each of individuals to take risk to find IP, get license, and do data reproducibility checking and translate them into some product, start generating data, so that they can raise capital from VC firm. So my proposal is that we activate flagship pioneering model here. So this early stage translation can be done more systemic way, by people managing a larger fund. LEMSIS is trying to do that, and as I mentioned, we have an incubator called R Discovery, where we do this kind of work, from university stage until Series A readiness. But I want to see this kind of activity is done by many parties here. Then we will have many Series A ready assets for which we can invite capital from not only Japanese VC firms but from global investors. So that is my first recommendation. My second recommendation is we should take a look at the European situation. US is too much advanced, So it's like you are asking 2 years boy to be a baseball player. It's too difficult, to demand such a thing for 2 years old guy. But if 2 years boy is asked to be some how do you say, a school baseball player, that may be possible, right? So 10 years ago, European situation it was very different from what we see right now. It was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, European situation is something like we see in Japan right now. There are many biotech companies, but not a lot of capital being raised, and many entrepreneurs are ex-academia, having almost no experience working for industrial biotech, and they were struggling, they did a lot of trial and error, but over the last 10 years, they matured a lot, the size of investment is much smaller compared to the US, but they are advancing their programs actively into clinic, generating a lot of nice POC data. Behind this European growth, there was a very strong governmental support, especially by the European central government. European Investment Fund injected huge amount of capital into venture capital firms locally in Europe, and biotech investment became very active. Then eventually a lot of companies were created and a lot of new data generated and a lot of pharma biotech deal happened. And Europe became a very attractive place for investors now. So, why don't we study more European situation and try to learn from the past, over the last 10 years?
Sorry, Fred. I'll be short. But actually, I want to respond to what Inaba-san said. So whether we create a flagship-like model or something else is something to be debated, right? And it's not going to be answered in the next 5 minutes, I can tell you that. But I would be cautious of focusing too much on academic spinouts. And if you look at Europe, is a great example of this, but yeah, some of those did come out of universities, but the ones that are successful, like Actelion is an old one, more recently Argenx and a few other really successful ones, they create really great products, right? And if you look at neighbors, China, Bristol Myers just paid $800 million today for an ADC company. And, it's not like they produce breakthrough product categories, but they can create great CAR-T products like Carvykti from Legend and great ADCs more recently, right? So, those two models are a little different. I'm not sure Japan has the firepower to do both. So really think about I think the government should think about, people in the ecosystem should think about which model really to pursue. And I guess there's no right answer, but that's a question we should all think about.
And Fred, back to you. Close us out.
Okay, yeah, no, so I'll try to be brief here too. So I generally agree with everyone else. I think, there's definitely a need for, cultural shift from risk aversion, more talent mobility, more deregulation too, more, IP savvy players. But I do think, and incubators, but I do think those are all moving in the right direction. Entrepreneurs are becoming more commercially focused. But at the end, if I had to pick one thing, I would say risk capital, right? I mean, it's the easiest answer, but it is probably the most obvious one. As you know, Japan's still at, venture capital investments only at 1% of what it is in the U.S. It's been that way for a long, long time. There are no institutional investors, no growth capital for the biotech sector here in Japan. There's no aftermarket and small public company support. And Shin mentioned, we need success cases. Definitely, we've seen, I think, just few that you can, that's debatable whether it's a success case or not. But those success cases usually, or I believe, can eventually break that catch-22, right? Without the capital in later stage companies, that doesn't trickle down to earlier stage companies. And I think that would enable more scientific talents and more entrepreneurs to be rewarded. Definitely, I think that relatively speaking, Japanese talents, quality talents are not fairly compensated. So, I mean, I think, everything is connected, but if I had to pick one thing, I think Japan needs more capital injected into the biotech sector. I'll stop there.
Those are great points from all of our panelists. And now that we have a couple minutes, I wanted to open it up to the audience and see, does anyone have a question they'd like to ask our panelists today? In the back?
Thank you for the panel. That was really enlightening. I do have one question regarding what you were saying with more money being injected into the Japan VC system. I've been in the system for a while, so I do know a bit of what's going on. But I was wondering if you think that I know there's a lot of VC money, but difficult to access. There's a lot of bank loans, but there's also a bit of stigma on getting bank loans, especially for a VC, especially for a startup, and many VCs are against the idea, and that may impact fundraising. I was wondering if you think that there should be more grants, either from the government, either from universities, injected into the system, as in like equity-free grants for startups here in Japan.
Yeah, I do think that, yes, Japan definitely is behind compared to, say, AMED still is way behind NIH, or, NIH plus NCI plus, among other types of government grants, but also, charity too, right? So I guess, from non-dilutive capital perspective, as well as equity, as well as debt, I think you can say the same. Yeah, and it's, we're not talking about, a poor country here, right? I mean, there is money. It's just that it's not flowing into risk assets, right? I mean, if you look at like, the pie chart for, any institutional investor, first of all, equity allocation is much lower than what it is on average around the world. Within that, private equity is very, very small. I mean, although, buyouts are getting, larger, and then you go into VC and then you go into the life science sector. I mean, you only have a very narrow sliver of the pie there. I think this is my personal opinion as a portfolio manager. I think you want to diversify more into risk capital to have healthy returns, right? Sustainable returns. So I think, from an investor standpoint, definitely there is money out there that could flow into this type of risk capital, and I think it should. Another thing that I wanted to point out, maybe I wasn't too clear, but not just, of course, VC, but we want to talk about, us VCs, we're funded by pension funds, insurance companies, fund of funds, and in Japan, pension funds are the biggest ones, especially the big ones, especially, they have nobody dedicated to biotech or life science, right? So I think that kind of a structural change is really needed, right? More, I mean, if you go to Fidelity in Boston, right, there's tons of PhDs, right, who are analysts in the biotech sector or healthcare sector. There aren't too many here. So I think that's very more at the source and the root of the money flow problem, which I think would enable more capital to trickle down to the early stage and private companies.
Thank you, Fred, and thank you for the question. All right, given timing, we will conclude the panel here and turn it back to Larry. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you again for your attention, everyone.
Thanks for that great discussion. We now have a break, and you all have earned it. There's water and coffee in the back, and we'll be reconvening in 10 minutes. Yeah, in 10 minutes. So please come back at 10 minutes. Thank you.